Hello, my name is Tara. I'm a partner technical consultant working in the North America Partner Services Division at Microsoft. Dynamics GP 2013 R2 now has a new workflow system, utilizing a custom workflow engine based in the GP code. The workflow design experience is now in a GP window, replacing the prior GP workflow system and removing the dependency on SharePoint. This system allows users to design workflows, such as approval paths for documents in Dynamics GP. The workflow approval can be completed within the user interface, and there is an option to approve them external to the user interface using the link in the notification email. In GP 2013 R2, 4 workflow types will be available for use in the new system: purchase order approval, purchase order requisition approval, time card approval, and project timesheet approval. Other workflow types will be available in future releases. Today we'll be going over the workflow prerequisites, setup for workflow 2.0, creating a workflow, and acting on a task. Workflow prerequisites. The new workflow includes the functionality to escalate an overdue workflow step. This escalation functionality is supported by the Microsoft SQL Server agent. Escalation of overdue steps is not required, but additional review of pending workflows will be necessary if it's not used. If escalation of overdue workflow step will be used, then ensure that the SQL Server agent is set up to start automatically with the operating system. Also with the new workflow includes the functionality to remote approve the workflow step. The remote approve functionality is supported by Microsoft Dynamics GP Web Services. Remote approval is not required, as a workflow approvals can be completed within Microsoft Dynamics GP user interface. Setup for workflow 2.0. The Workflow Setup window is located under Microsoft Dynamics GP, Tools, Setup, System, Workflow Setup. The new workflow functionality includes the option to send email notifications during the various workflow events. In order to have these emails sent, email must be enabled. Use the Enable Email Workflow checkbox in the upper right portion of the Workflow Setup window. Emails that are sent for approval step can include a link for completing the approval remotely. This also must be enabled. Use the Enable Email Action checkbox in the lower portion of the Workflow Setup window to enable these actions. The Workflow Calendar is located under Microsoft Dynamics GP, Tools, Setup, Company, Workflow, and Workflow Calendar. Each step in a workflow can be given a time limit which calculates a due date time by which the task must be completed. The workflow calendar allows users to define standard working hours for a company and holidays. For example, if a task with a time limit of 8 hours is assigned at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and the company's working hours are Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., then the due date time for the task is set for 3 p.m. the following Monday. Non-work days are not counted against the time limit set for an activity assignment for workflow steps. So for example, assume that you have set up a calendar to have Monday through Friday as work days and 8 to 5 as the hours work per day. Plus you added Monday, July 22nd to the calendar as a non-working day. The workflow step assigned to a user gives them 2 days to act upon the workflow task. Using the workflow calendar, if the user is assigned to a purchase order at 3 p.m. on Thursday, July 18th, they will have until 3 p.m. of Tuesday, July 23rd to approve or reject the purchase order. Message Setup is located under Microsoft Dynamics GP, Tools, Setup, Company, Workflow, Email Message Setup. Messages can be sent from a number of locations from within Workflow. The message setup window allows for these messages to be customized. Here is an example of a predefined one that comes with the system. Let's take a look at creating a workflow. There are 4 workflow types available in Microsoft Dynamics GP 2013 R2. To view and define the types, open the Workflow Maintenance window. Microsoft Dynamics GP, Tools, Setup, Company, Workflow, Workflow Maintenance. 2 of them are located under the Purchasing series, Purchase Order Approval, Purchase Requisition Approval. Under the Payroll series, Payroll Timecard Approval, and under the Project series, Timesheet Approval. Each workflow type must have 1 or more managers assigned before a workflow under this type can be activated. The managers will have workflow steps assigned to them in the event that no other assignment can be completed. 1 or more workflows can be created for each workflow type. Only one of the workflows under the given type can be active. To create a new workflow, ensure the workflow type is highlighted in the left-hand tree in the Workflow Maintenance window. Then click the New Workflow button. There are 4 groups of information for workflow: general data, steps, options, and overdue settings. The options that are available are send notifications for completed actions. When this option is marked, click the expansion button to open the Workflow Email Notification Maintenance window. Here you can choose to notify the originator when 1 or more of the actions listed are completed. For each action, an email message can be selected. There is also an option to send a carbon copy of the message to 1 additional party. Allow approver to delegate task. When this option is marked, the user who has a task assigned can delegate the task to another user. Allow originator to be an approver. Any user who creates a document such as a purchase order can submit for approval. You can specify that the originator for the workflow can be an approver. Always require at least 1 approver. Mark this checkbox if the workflow should require an approval, regardless of whether a condition for any of the steps have been met. Use alternate final approver. When this checkbox is marked, the alternate final approver can be entered. Overdue task section. When an approver fails to act on a task by the task due date, the task is considered overdue or escalated. Indicate what should happen to an overdue task by selecting one of the following options. Take no action. The task will remain assigned to the current approver. Escalate to the next approver. The system will automatically assign the task to the next approver in the workflow. Escalate to. When selected, use the lookup to select a specific user that the task should be assigned to. Automatically reject the overdue task. When the task expires, it will automatically reject. Workflow steps. Each workflow may have 1 or more steps defined. Steps are not required, but there is nothing to occur in a workflow without steps. To create a new workflow step, ensure that the workflow is highlighted in the left-hand tree of the Workflow Maintenance window. Then click on the New Step button in the New section of the ribbon. There are 5 groups of information for workflow: general data, order, condition, assignment, and completion. General step data. Enter a unique step name and description. Step type, approval, or task. Approval will require that a user gives approval as part of a workflow process. A task will require that a user completes a procedure. Order. If a workflow contains more than one step, you must choose between the two selections. This step is a first step, or this step follows the selected step. When the second option is marked, then the preceding step must be selected from the drop-down list. Condition. Choose if the step always requires an action. Action always requires this for a step, or if an action is only necessarily under one or more conditions. Action is required only if the following conditions are met. When the second selection is made, use the expansion button to open the Workflow Condition Editor and define the conditions when the steps will require an action. In the Assignment section, choose who the step or action should be assigned to. This may be one or more users. The selection can be made by choosing one or more specific approvers, choosing from a hierarchy, or choosing from a workflow role. In this section, the time limit can be selected. This is the amount of time allotted for the action to be performed on a particular task. The time limit can be based on available working days in the workflow calendar if the Apply Workflow Calendar checkbox is marked. Finally, if the Send Message button is marked, the user who is assigned to the task will also receive an email notification from that assignment. Completion policy. Choose when the step will be considered complete. When one or a majority or all the assigned users approve the step. Let's take a look at GP 2013 R2 Workflow 2.0 in action. For this example, let's take a look at some personas. Frank, the CFO, wants there to be a tight control over high-cost requisitions. Phyllis, the account manager, is responsible for setting up workflows in her organization in Fabricam. Phyllis also must approve all requisition requests entered by her direct reports. Anne, the controller, she needs a new computer. She also reports to Phyllis. For example, consider the following workflow. Anne enters in a purchase order requisition amount that is greater than $2,500. Because Anne directly reports to Phyllis, she will have to approve it. If the amount is greater than $2,500, then Frank will also have to approve it after Phyllis has approved it. I'm currently logged in as Phyllis in Microsoft Dynamics GP 2013 R2. Let's take a look at the Workflow Maintenance window. In here it shows that I have an active workflow. I have a step that is a direct manager approval. Then, if it's over $2,500, I have it going to the skip level manager. So let's log in as Anne and take a look at her entering in a requisition. I'm currently logged in as Anne in Microsoft Dynamics GP 2013 R2. So let's open up the requisition window. Transactions, Purchasing, Purchase Requisitions. I've already entered in a requisition, so let's just take a look at it first. For further information on how to enter in the requisition, please refer to the user manual or the requisition video. From here, I'm going to hit Submit so that it will follow the workflow process. Now let's log back in as Phyllis and take a look at the approval. Now that we're logged back in as Phyllis, let's look at the ways that we can act on a task. All transactions that have been submitted for approval can also be approved from the same location. So let's open the Purchase Requisition window. Transactions, Purchasing, Purchase Requisitions, and let's pull up that requisition. From here, I can approve, reject, or delegate. Another way that the workflow task can be acted upon is using the list views. Purchasing, and then the Purchasing Requisition Transactions, click on Purchasing Requisition Pending Approval. I select the document, I can approve and complete, reject, and delegate. Approvals can also be performed outside of Microsoft Dynamics GP. Approving from an email. When a document or transaction has been assigned to a user for approval, an email message can be sent to the user. The email message displays information about the document and has a link. When the user clicks on the link, a window will appear where the user can approve or reject the document. Here's an example of what an email message may look like. I can approve, reject, and delegate. Now that Phyllis has approved the document, the next step in the workflow is being sent over to Frank. So let's log in as Frank. Now that we're logged in as Frank, we can see that he received an email, and we can approve the requisition as well by clicking on the Approve button and then Approve. Now that Frank has approved the document, let's log back in as Anne and take a look. Transactions, Purchasing, and Purchase Requisition. Now I can see that the document is complete, and if I want, I can also view the history. Recapping on what we talked about. Workflow, Prerequisites, Setup for Workflow 2.0, Creating a Workflow, Acting on a Task. Call to Action, create an environment to better understand these concepts. And for more in-depth information, review the Workflow 2.0 documentation.